Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. Ethan lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a half-smile, his thoughts buzzing with anticipation. Across the room, Clara hummed to herself, shuffling through a stack of colorful brochures that littered the coffee table. The sun streamed through the open windows, casting a warm glow on the polished wooden floor. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the spring air, setting a serene scene in their cozy living room. "Hey, what do you think about snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef?" Clara asked, her voice laced with excitement as she waved a brochure at Ethan. Ethan looked up and chuckled. "Only if you promise not to freak out over the fish this time." Clara laughed, a genuine, hearty sound that made Ethan's heart swell with affection. "I'll try my best. But no promises if a shark decides to say hello." They had been planning this Australia trip for months, saving up every extra penny and mapping out every detail. Their itinerary was packed with adventures, snorkeling, hiking in the rainforests, a wine tour in the Yarra Valley, and more. It was supposed to be their dream vacation, a much-needed escape from the monotony of daily life. As the evening wore on, Ethan stretched and yawned. "I'm going to check our flight details one last time before bed. Where'd you put the tickets and our passports?" Clara's brow furrowed as she pointed to the mahogany desk in the corner. "Should be in the top drawer, under the insurance papers." But they weren't there. Nor were they in any of the other drawers, or under piles of magazines, or tucked into any of their usual, safe spots. Ethan's unease grew with every empty nook they checked. Clara, usually so composed, began to pace, her worry lines deepening. "It doesn't make sense," she exclaimed, throwing her hands up in frustration. "I put them right here." "I know I did." "Hey, it's okay. We'll find them," Ethan tried to soothe her, though his own panic simmered just below the surface. "Let's just..." His phone buzzed, cutting him off. A message from Jake, his best friend. Confused, Ethan glanced at the preview text and felt his stomach drop. "Hey, man. Just saw Clara at the airport with some guy. Thought you guys left next week?" Blood roaring in his ears, Ethan stared at the message, then at Clara, who had stopped pacing and stood frozen, her face pale. "Clara? What is Jake talking about?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then swallowed hard. "Ethan, Who's the guy, Clara?" His voice was a low growl, foreign even to his own ears. Tears welled up in her eyes. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me," Ethan demanded, his heart thudding painfully against his ribs. Clara took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan. I'm sorry." Without another word, she turned and rushed out of the house, leaving a stunned and shattered Ethan behind. In the days that followed, the truth emerged in painful fragments. Clara had been seeing someone else for over a year. She had used the tickets and their travel documents to leave with him, leaving Ethan with nothing but betrayal and a broken heart. The pain turned to anger, and the anger to resolve. Ethan vowed to himself that Clara would not get away with this. She had destroyed their life together, he would make sure she regretted it. With a new, cold determination, Ethan began to plan his revenge. Clara's betrayal would not go unpunished. As he set his schemes into motion, he didn't notice the dark clouds gathering outside, mirroring the storm that brewed in his heart. The first chapter of his vengeance had just begun. Ethan sat in the dim light of his office, the glow from his laptop casting shadows across his face. His mind raced as he scrolled through the endless digital trails Clara had left behind. Social media profiles, email exchanges, bank statements, he had gained access to them all. Every discovery felt like a stab in the heart, yet he pushed forward, fueled by a relentless drive for retribution. As he delved deeper, he found transactions that puzzled him, payments to a company he didn't recognize, frequent late-night calls to unfamiliar numbers. Each clue was a piece of the puzzle he was desperate to solve. Ethan knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed help. The next day, Ethan met with Sophia, a private investigator known for her discretion and efficiency. They sat in a secluded corner of a bustling cafe, the clamor of the lunch crowd enveloping them in anonymity. "I need to know everything she did, who she's with, and where they are now," Ethan explained, his voice low and urgent. Sophia nodded, her eyes sharp and assessing. "I can start tracking her digital footprint and the financials you've uncovered. We might also want to look into her personal connections, see who else might be involved." Ethan agreed, feeling a grim satisfaction as Sophia outlined her approach. He wasn't just uncovering Clara's deceit, he was unraveling a conspiracy. As Sophia departed with a promise of swift investigation, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a text from his sister, Laura. "Need to talk. Can you meet tonight?" Hours later, Ethan found himself at Laura's cozy apartment, the familiar setting a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. Laura handed him a cup of tea, her brow furrowed with concern. "Ethan, what's going on with you? You haven't been yourself," she pressed, her voice filled with worry. Ethan hesitated, then the floodgates opened. He told her everything, from Clara's betrayal to his plans for revenge. Laura listened, her expression turning from shock to disbelief. "This isn't you, Ethan. Revenge won't bring you peace," she cautioned, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. But Ethan was resolute. "I have to do this, Laura. I can't let her just walk away from what she did." Laura sighed, a deep, sorrowful sound. "I just don't want to see you consumed by this hatred. Remember, revenge can be a double-edged sword." Ethan nodded, though his decision remained unshaken. He hugged his sister goodbye, her words echoing in his mind, a nagging doubt he refused to acknowledge. Back home, Ethan received an encrypted email from Sophia. She had made a breakthrough, a series of encrypted messages between Clara and her lover, discussing their plans. The messages hinted at something bigger, a plot that involved more than just infidelity. Ethan's heart raced as he read the transcripts. This wasn't just about leaving him, they were planning something that could destroy more than just his life. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. Determined to expose the entire scheme, Ethan prepared for the confrontation. He would not only reclaim his life but also bring Clara and her accomplices to justice. The next steps he took would be critical, but he was ready. The game was just beginning, and Ethan was not going to lose. Ethan paced the length of his living room, his mind a whirlwind of strategy and anticipation. The digital clock on the wall seemed to mock him, ticking down the minutes until his planned confrontation with Clara and her lover. Each second was a sharp reminder of the stakes at play. Sophia had arranged everything. She tracked Clara to a small, upscale hotel in the city where she and her lover were supposedly laying low, possibly plotting their next move. The details were sparse, but enough for Ethan to act on. Tonight was the night he would face them both. As darkness fell, Ethan drove to the hotel, his grip on the steering wheel tight, his jaw set. He parked a block away and approached the hotel on foot, his every step fueled by a cocktail of rage and resolve. Inside, the hotel lobby was quiet, with only a few guests lounging or passing through. Ethan approached the reception, his demeanor calm despite the storm raging inside him. "I need the room number for Clara Madison," he said, sliding a photo of her across the counter. The receptionist hesitated, eyeing the photo and then Ethan. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't release that information." Ethan leaned in, his voice a controlled whisper. "It's important. She's my wife, and she's here with someone who's dangerous. I need to see her." The receptionist, caught in the urgency of Ethan's plea, nodded slowly and scribbled down a room number on a piece of paper, sliding it back with a cautious look. Armed with the information, Ethan made his way to the elevator, his heart pounding in his chest. The doors slid open on the 5th floor, and he stepped out, his steps silent on the plush carpet. Room 507 was at the end of the hallway, its door unassuming yet representing a threshold that would change everything. Ethan knocked firmly, his breath steady now, his earlier nerves steeled by the gravity of the moment. The door swung open, and there stood Clara, her expression a mix of shock and fear. Behind her, a man, tall, dark-haired, obviously the lover, peered over her shoulder, his stance defensive. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" Clara's voice trembled, the color draining from her face. "We need to talk," Ethan said, pushing past her into the room. His gaze fixed on the man. "Both of you." Clara closed the door reluctantly, her eyes flicking between Ethan and her lover. "Ethan, please, let's be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "You call running off with him and plotting behind my back reasonable?" The lover stepped forward, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "Let's not make this any worse. We can explain." "Explain?" Ethan's voice rose, his anger palpable. "I've seen the messages. I know there's more going on here than just an affair. What are you planning?" Clara looked at her lover, then back at Ethan, her resolve hardening. "It's not what you think, Ethan. This isn't just about us. There's more at stake here than our marriage." Her words caught Ethan off guard, his fury faltering for a moment. "What do you mean?" Before Clara could respond, the sound of sirens pierced the air outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the window, casting the room in a strobe of urgency. Ethan glanced out, his mind racing. Had Sophia called the police? The lover moved towards the window, cursing under his breath. "We need to leave, now," he insisted, pulling Clara toward him. But Clara shook her head, her decision clear in her sudden calm. "No, I need to fix this. Ethan deserves to know everything." As the police entered the hotel, the tension in the room peaked. Clara turned to Ethan, her eyes steady. "Let me explain. Please." Ethan, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, nodded slowly. Whatever Clara's secrets were, he was about to discover the full extent of the betrayal. And he would be ready for whatever came next. The room was thick with tension as the police officers entered, their presence a stark reminder of how dire the situation had become. Clara, her face pale but resolute, stood next to Ethan while her lover paced nervously, casting occasional glances toward the window. "Everyone stay calm," one of the officers said, his voice authoritative. "We've received a noise complaint. Is everything all right here?" Ethan, still grappling with the surrealness of the moment, spoke up. "I need to explain what's happening. I believe my wife, Clara, and her companion have been involved in something criminal." The officer turned to Clara, his gaze steady. "Is this true?" Clara looked at Ethan, her expression conflicted. "There's more to this than you know. Ethan, you deserve the truth." The lover, sensing the shift in Clara's demeanor, stepped in. "This isn't going to help anyone. We need to get out of here." The officer's eyes narrowed. "I'm going to need everyone to stay put while we investigate. No one's leaving until we get a full account." As the officers began to question Clara and her lover, Ethan's thoughts raced. He knew that the whole truth had not yet been laid bare. Despite the mounting frustration, he could feel the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. Clara took a deep breath and finally spoke. "Ethan, there's something you need to know. What you saw in the messages, it wasn't just about us. It was about a larger scheme involving financial fraud and money laundering. The company Jake was involved with was a front for laundering money through various investments. I got caught up in it without realizing how deep it was." Ethan's eyes widened in shock. "Jake? My best friend? How long has this been going on?" Clara shook her head. "Jake was the mastermind. I was unwittingly involved in his plans. I never intended to hurt you this way. But when you started investigating, I was forced to protect him and the operation." Ethan's mind reeled as the pieces connected. Jake, the trusted friend, had been manipulating Clara. Her affair was not just a personal betrayal but a thread in a much larger and dangerous web. The officer, having overheard enough, motioned for Ethan to follow him out into the hallway. "We need to take statements from everyone involved. If you have information about criminal activities, you'll need to provide it." Ethan nodded, his anger and hurt momentarily replaced by a grim sense of justice. "I'll cooperate, but I need to make one thing clear: Clara and I are done." As the night wore on, Ethan's statement helped the police piece together the extent of Jake's criminal activities. Clara, now under investigation for her part in the scheme, faced legal repercussions. The lover was detained, but the full ramifications of the operation were still unfolding. Hours later, Ethan stood alone in the hotel lobby, the weight of the evening settling heavily on his shoulders. Clara was taken away by the authorities, her face a mask of regret and sorrow. Ethan's heart was numb, the life he had planned was irrevocably shattered. Laura arrived, her expression a mix of relief and sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I wish things had turned out differently." Ethan hugged his sister tightly, the familiar comfort a small balm to his wounds. "I need to move on. It's over, Laura. I can't keep living in the past." As he drove home, Ethan reflected on the night's events. The betrayal was deeper than he had ever imagined, involving not just Clara but his closest confidant. The pain of deception was harsh and unforgiving, leaving him with a resolve to rebuild his life on his own terms. In the weeks that followed, Ethan cut all ties with Clara and Jake. The once vibrant plans for their future were now tainted by deceit and greed. Ethan's life, though scarred, began to find a new direction. The journey of recovery was just beginning, but he knew one thing for certain: he would never allow himself to be deceived again. The finality of it all settled over him, a mix of relief and sorrow. Clara and Ethan's lives had diverged forever, each path shaped by the choices made in the shadows. Theirs was a story marked by betrayal, but Ethan's future lay ahead, uncharted and full of potential.